Hi, thank you for joining me for another Dear Sam Horse Help Horsemanship series. Today I wanted to share three different things to perhaps simplify some of the challenges you might be facing with your horse. And I think something that people struggle with is the sense of feeling like they are accomplishing enough or doing enough or progressing fast enough with their horse. And something that I often have to remind students and folks who participate in clinics and my remote coaching folks and people all over the world is horses and the horsemanship journey is not about how fast we get there, and it is not about keeping up with maybe your neighbors or your friends and what they're doing with their horses. And everyone is beginning their journey or along their journey in a different place, and they all have different history, they have different abilities, they have different horses they're working with, and the journey often is winding. It is not straight. It is not something that we can foresee in the future that by this date we'll be accomplishing X, Y, and Z. And I think a lot of times people create a self-induced pressure that winds up causing this kind of cloud of negativity over the horsemanship experience. And I really encourage people to let go of all that. Let go of your expectations, let go of your have tos, let go of your unrealistic comparisons or unrealistic goals as far as where you're currently at versus where you would like to go, and putting a time frame on it. This really is about the journey. And so today's tips that I'm going to share with you are three things that I found that really limit and inhibit the person's ability to help the horse progress. And the first thing that comes up, and this is a hard one, is the power of perception. And so many people are often mentally way ahead of where they currently are at, as far as literally when they're next to their horse, but also without the horse, and in terms of their own self-assessment as far as what things are going well in the equine partnership and those that they're struggling with. And I find that until things become big and perhaps dangerous or maybe scary with the horse, we're not really honest about the quality, or we're not reflective about the quality of what is happening in the human horse partnership. And I can't tell you how many students or, again, clinic participants come to me after they've spent some time or after they've been learning for a while, and they start to say things like, I never realized I could ask these things of my horse. I never realized I could have this standard with my horse. I never realized my horse could offer me this much with me asking so little of him. And, these sort of things don't happen through just mindless repetition or fluke, occurrences. A lot of what helps shift how the interaction goes between the human and the horse, and how the horse perceives the human's communication, is based on the human's perception. And much of the time, many people, irrelevant of the discipline, irrelevant of how much experience they may have, their acceptance for what is okay or what is good enough or what is fine in the interaction really is masking a large number of holes in the communication and in the horse's education, and usually also in the human's education. And the problem with masking these things or going, well, that's good enough, is that everything builds upon the next thing that we present to the horse. And so if we are at all sneaking, hurrying, rushing, being hopeful, sort of staying in a passive reactive mode during the interaction, then the more specific or more difficult things we present for the horse in the future, we've basically set him up to fail. And when we set our horse up to fail, his response is often creating reactive defensive behavior, and then we get scared, or we potentially get hurt, or we get overwhelmed in different scenarios, and then we don't know what to do, and then we feel like we're stuck, and now a vicious cycle has begun of our horse offering us all of these chaotic, fearful, dramatic behaviors, and we just feel like we're just hoping to get through a situation. And so then it feels like we're actually going backwards in our progression. So all of those times of being polite, in your perception, or being hopeful, or avoiding really addressing root causes of the horse's unwanted behavior doesn't work in your favor, and it really doesn't help the equine partnership. And unfortunately, there is this illusion that, if you've ridden for a certain number of years or a certain amount of time, or you've had the horse for a certain amount of time, that we should be beyond things. And the real truth of the matter is, most of everything and anything we present to the horse is based on the basics. And the basics in how we communicate, the basics in the horse's ability to be able to let go of a thought or a fixation and be able to mentally be available to check in and hear the human's opinion, the ability to influence the horse's energy and his physical movement and the specificity of it. And so as we are progressing in our horsemanship journey, we're basically continuously refining the basics, and then we apply the basics towards each of the scenarios we present to the horse. So perhaps take a few minutes and think about your perception, and think about literally the words that you use and how you perceive the experiences with the horse, and maybe refine your perception. Maybe perhaps get a little more honest with yourself, even if it becomes a bit uncomfortable, as far as really what is the quality of the interaction between you and your horse during the communication, whether the horse is loose, whether the horse is on the lead rope, or whether you're sitting on his back. So that's the first tip. The second tip is the power of observation. This is another one that a lot of folks who work with me bring up, where they go, I never really was given permission time to watch and observe the horse. And to me, this is sort of mind-blowing, because there is nothing natural about the interaction with the horse. And for most people nowadays, they are not, born into a family that has horses. They are not living a life where they are around horses every day. And so for many folks, the time that they actually have to spend with the horse is really quite limited. So there's no way that we can at all assume that we can understand horse behavior on a, we'll say, major scale or in depth, or be aware of the nuances, because we're just not around it. And that's okay that we don't have the same lifestyle as maybe we used to have 100 years ago, where everything depended on horses. But if that is the case, then we need to take the time to prioritize observing the horse. And what I mean by this is, the horse is constantly giving feedback, whether he's in a herd scenario, whether he's by himself in a stall, whether you're near him or far away, whether he's loose or on the lead rope. The horse is continuously giving feedback. And I find most people do not, one, recognize or acknowledge how the horse is communicating, and two, they are constantly inserting human emotions to explain away why the horse is behaving in the manner in which he is. And unfortunately, when the human comes up with this inaccurate story of how and why the horse is behaving as he is, and it's usually based on the human's emotions and the human's frustration, then the way in which the human responds to the horse is usually unfair. So one of the things that I suggest to people is take time and prioritize watching the horse, literally watching the horse. If you're stuck right now because of weather and you can't get out to your horse, there are millions of horse clips and videos online that you can watch. Turn off the sound, ignore whatever the original teaching or intention of the video was, but practice watching horses. Every single body part is continuously communicating something. And the thing about when we talk about, the timing of our communication, part of what separates those who really have wonderful timing to those who always seem like they're reacting after the fact is their ability to, one, recognize, two, acknowledge, and three, believe what the horse is communicating with his body language. So that might be an area that you start practicing focusing on and zeroing in on to refine your understanding, your awareness. And it basically takes away what many people kind of feel like is the magic act of, well, when do I do something and how do I know when? And I always say, well, the horse is telling you. And this can help, in so many different aspects, whether you're working with your horse from the ground or whether you're in the saddle. The horse is always communicating, and yet we are so removed from it, we're so distant from it, we're so mentally distracted by so many other things, even if they're not horse related, that we are unaware to listen, recognize, and believe the horse. So that's tip number 2. And tip number 3 comes really down to your availability to learn. and watching this video, you're already one step ahead. But really, it does, because so much of the time people get frustrated. You know, I've been riding for 20 years, or I've had this horse for 10 years, or this is a new to me horse, but you know, I have a long history with horses, or I'm a novice rider and I'm taking lessons and I'm reading everything I can, but I'm not really sure what I should do. And what people don't realize is much of the time when we become fixated on, I'm going to learn this, you know, whether it's something specific, a maneuver with the horse, or maybe accomplishing a certain obstacle or certain jump, or, you know, improving roping, or whatever the discipline, it doesn't really matter what it is. There is such a fixation on the final outcome of the specific task that we forget to assess what are all the pieces we need in order to present the ideal outcome scenario. And this is where, when I talk about the human availability, is we need to be available, that even though we may want to accomplish whatever the long-term goal is, we need to be available to adapt and adjust to whatever comes up along the way, so that we can slow down and address where the horse might be potentially unclear on our communication and what we're doing and how we're doing and why we're doing it. We might have to refine or adjust or adapt that so that it becomes clear to the horse. We need to become available to believe if the horse is at all concerned or defensive, rather than bullying him through it because we feel that we've presented this before, or we feel that he should know better by this time. If the horse is showing fear and concern and defensiveness, he's not making it up. He doesn't have the ability to do so. So it's our choice to be available, to believe him, listen to him, and stop and put aside our goal, whatever it may be, the long-term goal, and say, right now I need to address what the horse is conveying is causing him concern. Because if I don't address his concern now, it's not going to randomly or magically go away. So it will just keep reappearing. It might come out in different behaviors, but the concern will still be there, and that will sabotage the potential of us accomplishing our long-term goal, certainly with quality, if the horse is always feeling defensive, worried, or concerned. So the more that we become available to adapt whatever it is we're presenting, or how we do things, or when we do things, or where we do things, and we watch for the horse's feedback and communication, and we take time to experiment and adjust what we're presenting, and then we watch for the horse's different feedback, it helps us learn. It helps us learn how can we best help our horse. It helps us learn how we need to perhaps adjust maybe the size of the segments in the scenarios that we present to the horse, and it helps us become available to raise the standard in which we are going to say, okay, my horse feels confident, rather than just sneaking by something. Let's address something until my horse is curious about it, rather than tolerant and obedient. So my third tip, learn to be available. And the first way that you can do that is by realizing how often you are constantly having judgmental, critical thoughts towards your horse. I don't want my horse to do this. He shouldn't be doing that. Why is he doing this? All of those sort of thoughts, you are unavailable to actually adapt, experiment, adjust what you're presenting to the horse. You're critiquing the horse for the horse doing the best he can based on the information you've provided. So thank you for joining me. I'd love to hear your feedback, and